Hello, everyone. I'm Candid Stanisci of Lacrosse and NLL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. A good one would be nice. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now on Lacrosse Talk, and of course, we talk NLL as well. Joining me as usual is Gary Groob. Gary, how you doing, buddy?
I'm great, Frank. My internet seems to be doing weird stuff again, so, good luck to us all.
Welcome to the new age. Our guest today is Doug Luey. Doug has, he's the master of everything and has it all figured out on how to make lacrosse, and especially box lacrosse, the greatest thing ever. Mr. Luey, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. I'm always happy to talk about lacrosse. I don't know if I'm the master of any of them, but I'm certainly involved in a lot.
Well, let's just say from my perspective, you are, and from what Gary tells me, he confirms my thinking. You were the box chair, sector chair on the CLA board of directors, and you were VP senior to major on the OLE board of directors for 6 years. So obviously you're deep into the organizational side of lacrosse. But first, I'd like to ask you how you got involved in lacrosse. We ask everyone that question, and I think it's important.
Well, it's a bit of a long story, but
we got time.
I'll try to be brief. I grew up in Port Dalhousie. Some people would say that St. Catharines is a suburb of Port Dalhousie, but I would say the other way around. Not far from what was known as the Port Lions Bowl, an outdoor lacrosse bowl. And started playing at a very young age before there was such a thing as paperweight or what we called tyke after that, and not playing against my older brothers. And I was about 8 years old. My parents come home and broke my heart and told me we were moving. And I thought, oh, geez, I'll never be playing lacrosse again. And thankfully, they moved to about 5 doors from the Hague Bowl in St. Catharines, which is another outside bowl. A lot of Man Cup games played there in past years. And walked down the end of the street after we moved into the new house, and sure enough, there's a lacrosse bowl there, and there's a couple of kids with lacrosse sticks, and my brother and I got involved in the St. Catharines Minor Lacrosse Association.
We're very blessed to have people like yourself. We've had many come through here, and the one common thread is the dedication to the game. You become very dedicated. You started playing. When did the playing end, and how soon did the organizational management thing kick in for you?
Well, I think it's kind of by default. I was fortunate enough to come to Oshawa to play junior lacrosse. Unfortunately, the year I got here, Jim decided to give up the junior A team and move to Detroit to his new position with the Red Wings. It didn't last long, so Jim came back here in 1977, and I got the opportunity to play for him. And I guess the reason I got into coaching and the administration side is because I didn't have a lot of talent. And after junior, if I wanted to stay involved in the game, I either had to coach or become an administrator. I've been fortunate to do both for a long time.
And the satisfaction you draw from it?
Well, I just love the game, and I think that guys like Mr. Bishop and Mr. Tether in St. Catharines, quite a few people, Joe Hingeman, I think they gave their time to people like me when I was younger, and it's quite satisfying to have young fellows who went through your system. Or I have kids with the Green Gales now that I played with their grandparents, so it's kind of satisfying to see them grow up and go through the game and stay with the game.
Let's unleash Gary on you.
Well, you're being kind of modest, I think. You had a lot of success with the Green Gale organization. Let's talk a little bit about that. First, about the team itself and your role with them as you moved up.
Well, I was involved in the in Oshawa minor lacrosse when I first moved here, when my playing days were done, and Oshawa minor and the Green Gales folded in 1983, so I was out of lacrosse for a year or two, and then a friend of mine had a pretty talented young lad that was playing in Whitby, and they needed a coach. So I went back to Whitby and started coaching, and enjoyed it, and stayed through the Whitby minor organization for a great number of years. And then there were some new people coming into Whitby minor, and it was kind of time for me to move on. And the Green Gales were going to host the 2000 Founders Cup. They asked me if I would jump on board on the Founders Cup committee, so I said sure. And lo and behold, the next year, Wayne Colley and Ian Wales left to go coach in Junior A, and they asked me if I wanted to take over the Green Gales Junior B team, and I said sure. I've been there ever since.
Now, you've had a number of awards. Frank mentioned a little bit. You had the OLA President's Award, the CLA Recognition Award back in 2011, the Queen Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2012 for contributions to the game, inducted as a builder at the Ontario Lacrosse Hall of Fame 2014. Let's talk about the blood, sweat, and tears in earning these things, because God knows you put a lot of hours and a lot of time and effort into it. Well,
I think, recognition and awards are very, very nice, but I've really been blessed. And I don't know if, it's because of the way I operate or not, but in every organization I've been in, I've been really, really lucky to have really good people with me. I may have the odd idea or two, but I don't do a lot of hands-on work. I'm fortunate enough to have really good volunteers with me in every organization, and that we share the passion, we share the vision, and so the job needs to get done. Those awards should be shared with all volunteers. Volunteers behind the scenes, they don't get rings and man cups and middle cups and founders cups, presidents cups. They're the ones that make it happen, and I've really been fortunate to have really good people.
The unselfishness involved of people like you means that the gratification that you get isn't so much what people celebrate about you, even though they do from time to time. It's that self-satisfaction you get for being a part of something that's really important to you, I guess, right?
Absolutely. My brother asked me that. Actually, I was at the Hall of Fame induction when I went in 2014. My brother said, "Why do you do this?" And I had to think about it for a minute, because it was, it was a very prestigious night and nice to be recognized. And I really wanted to give him an honest answer. So I said to him, the gratification I get is from the young men to come back to me years later, and they say, "Hi, Mr. Luey, how you doing?" Or you get invited to their weddings or their christenings or their children, things like that. That's the gratification. I mean, it's a wonderful thing about our game. I've often said that lacrosse people are different, and I think that's true compared to other sports. When your playing days are over, or when you're finished coaching, you remain friends with the competitors and the teammates for years to come. And I think that's the big part of the gratification.
Yeah, I think the biggest understanding that I've developed going back when I first started getting involved in lacrosse is to the depth and the width of the commitment, not just from you yourself, which we're pointing out at this moment, but the players as well, and the organizations that run lacrosse. It is a 12-month-a-year proposition.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not like the trunk slammers in golf that miss the cut on Friday afternoon and head home. It's 12 months a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Gary?
Now, you took over being the Major Series Lacrosse Commissioner as an interim in 2016, and you were hesitant about when they made you Commissioner in 2017. Talk to us a little bit about that time and that era, and as you were coming into it.
Yeah, it was a difficult decision to make, even to do it on the interim basis. The previous commissioner, Jim Brady, and I were friends, still are to this day, and I have a lot of respect for Jim. And I didn't want to seem like I was going in and pushing him aside or whatever. But, once the decision was made, a couple of the governors came to me and said, we really need help for the draft because they don't trust each other. There's a lack of trust. And I said, well, I'll run the draft for you. No problem. Because it was going to be in Whitby anyhow. So, it was pretty easy to do. I'd been through a number of drafts before as in my other roles in CLA and the OLA. And so I went and did the draft and got to meet the rest of the governors. So they asked me again, and I said, no, and I'll tell you why. I said, you don't have a business plan here. I said, and nothing in your recent history tells me you're going to have one very soon. And so I guess they got together and said, well, he's right. So let's give him the ability to put a business plan together for us. So I did, and I gave him a 5-year vision of where I thought we could take this league. And we're, the pandemic's put it a little bit behind, but we're basically 3 years of playing into that 5-year plan. And I'm very, very proud of the governors themselves who have changed their mentality. They're not as adversary anymore. And when we go into meetings now, we talk about what's best for the league and for the game instead of what's best for our individual teams. And I think MSL is going to be in the map, pretty big in the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Now, as the commissioner, what are your tasks for the league per se?
Well, I think it started out as a mending fences kind of thing because we have a lot of pushback from other entities, be it the Winter League, longer season, more teams, players' time. Our governing bodies are all struggling through the pandemic with funding. But basically, I believe in written rules, be it CLA, OLA, or our own policy paper in MSL. And I think those lines got blurred in the past. I am a black and white guy, and I said that to the governors. If it's not in the rules, we're not doing it. And if you want to put it in the rules, let's take the steps to put it into our policy paper. If you're all in agreement or you're unanimous, democracy prevails here. And if the majority of our teams want to change the way we're doing business, that's the way we'll do it. But I think for a long time we were changing rules on the fly to suit the situation rather than what was in the best interest of the league long term.
Now, you made a number of different rules coming into this year, even before the tournament that we'll talk about soon. But let's talk about the rule changes and what went into them to make it more like the NLL, really.
Yeah, I don't really like calling them NLL rules because I am a little concerned about the Americanization of Canada's national summer sport. But there's been a lot of talk at various levels, different leagues, about unification of rules. And I believe in the unification of rules. It seems ludicrous to me that we have 4 governing bodies in lacrosse using the same players and the same officials and playing 4 different games. Pretty hard to sell the game, sell the sport, market the sport if people don't know what they're watching.
Yeah, Bill Fox was on the show also. He said the same thing. To have 4 different rule books and try and remember which rule for which league was damn near impossible.
Yeah, it's tough on the players, let alone the referees got a tough job out there. And, they got to turn it on and off from one night to the next, depending on what they're doing. The international rules are slightly different than the NLL. The NLL rules are slightly different than us. And we have a couple of unique rules in the Man Cup agreement that the WLA and MSL agree on. Mm-hmm. But I'm a firm believer that, lacrosse rule book is the same. A slash is a slash, on ball or off ball slash is the same. Should be called the same way. And the actual individual rules, be it 8-second rule, 4-second rule, needed some work. But the Classic was a perfect opportunity for us to actually try it rather than just talk about it. So everyone saw it. The players saw it. The referees saw it. Our governors saw it. And we actually have a meeting tonight, and we're going to review the next steps for what we did try, what we liked, what we didn't like. We've also sent out a survey to 300 people. Gary, you'll probably get one of people that purchase tickets for the Classic, because we want the fans' input too.
That's great. That's great.
It's pretty important. We've also shared it with the referees. We want their input.
Can you expand on what you said about the Americanization of the rules? Example of what you mean and an idea of what we're talking about here.
I guess for newcomers to the game that may not understand it, people have been around for a while. I'll use the restraining lines as an example. We used to have a 15-foot circle, face-off circle, same 2-foot radius in the center with the dot. And you had 2 referees keeping an eye on the face-off. Well, I think the Americanization comes from, we brought in restraining lines similar to field. And I think it was always the goal of all the professional leagues to get more and more U.S. fans engaged. And I think the former major indoor lacrosse league, the NLL now, they did it. And it was one way of, trying to increase the participation of American players into the box game. And I think that's an example. It's tough in our game with our history, where we have our elderly fans, and our demographic is a little older than most sports, say, well, that's not the way we used to do it. We used to have the scrum off, the face off, and all that. And I think that's, we don't want to lose sight of that as we talk about rule changes. We want to make sure it's still important to them to recognize the game. There's been a lot of good rule changes come from those leagues. But I think one thing that we sometimes forget is that nowadays the box lacrosse players are bigger, stronger, and faster, like most sports. So we have to adapt to that. We have to protect the players. We have to protect the integrity of the game, with the realization that they are bigger, faster, and stronger. What worked 20 years ago doesn't work anymore.
And then integrating the outdoor game and trying to apply some of the, I guess, nuances that are people are aware of who watch the outdoor game. It may not fit, no pun intended, the circle might not fit in the box.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. I think, the example I always use, comparison field to box, is American field players don't like being stick checked, and Canadian box players don't like being shoulder checked. It's just not the way you play, and that they're unique to those games. And the NLL is a little bit of a hybrid of that. There is more and more specialization in the pro league. Strictly defensive players, strictly offensive players, transition players, and our old mentality thinking is they don't like that, because in their era, Frank, I heard you talk about it not too long ago, you played both ends of the floors with a wooden stick.
Exactly. One of the other things that you changed, and I really loved this, was that you had a mandate for the referees to take no guff from anybody, coaches, players, and it sped the game up, because these games they lasted under 2 hours. But it didn't take away from the action. If anything, it increased the flow of the game. I love that.
Yeah, I was really, really pleased with the results. We did talk to the referees before the game. We said, listen, guys, we know this is tough on you, because don't lose sight of the fact that they're used to doing that game with a 3-man system. In our Classic, we only had 2 referees on the floor. So we wanted to showcase the young players, the drafted players or the protected players over the last 2 years that some teams hadn't seen yet. And it was important to protect those players. So rather than slowing the game down with the stuff that normally, can happen behind the play and, yakking from benches or whatever, we just told them, we don't have time or patience for this. If it gets out of hand, toss them. And right off the bat, they clamped down. It didn't take too long for the teams to adapt.
Yep.
Which is why I think we can get rid of the crap. We always talk about this, too much chirping, too much bad language, et cetera, et cetera. Well, sometimes we're our own worst enemies. We can fix it. It'll go away immediately. You just gotta, if you talk about field lacrosse, for example, you never see it in field lacrosse because they have a zero tolerance policy.
Right.
Isn't that the key, though? The key is to ensure that everybody involved understands what the rules are, and you almost have to give them a refresher before the game or call the game the same all the time.
I guess that's one of my roles as commissioner, is that I need to give those refreshers less and less as time goes on. I mean, our league pretty much knows how I feel about it, and I guess it comes from the referees that we need to partner with them rather than be adversaries. And I think we've made some progress there in the last 3 years. I think the senior referees look at MSL now differently than they did 4 or 5 years ago. A lot of them, and some of them were back in the Classic, a lot of those very good senior referees want to come back and do our league now.
Yeah, the players and coaches, and they like to test the envelope, if you will. So if you explain to them what might happen, what will happen, and then you actually do what you said would happen, the next time they come out, I think to your comment that you just said, then people expect it. The players and the coaches expect those calls, so they don't bother trying.
Yeah, it's the referees do go over the top once in a while. I don't always take their side, because sometimes I think there's situations where their skin could be a little bit thicker, or sometimes maybe a little too thin, and they react immediately. Maybe not because something happened during the game. Could be something that happened outside of, in their home life or their work life or whatever. But we don't expect them to show up at the facility with that chip on their shoulder, because two teams are waiting there and the fans are waiting there to see a good lacrosse game.
Right. Now, we touched on the MSL Classic. Let's talk about it. This was your baby, and you blew me away the first week when you told me you put this together in 5 days, because the caliber of this thing was untouchable. It was absolutely fantastic to watch. And really, from my perspective, I really didn't see a whole lot of glitches. Now, obviously, behind the scenes, you're running around all game long, or 2 games going at the same time. But just talk about how you put this thing together, and so quickly and so well.
Well, it's really an interesting story in that we knew that the Junior A's, the Ontario Junior Lacrosse League, was going to try it. And they had already put plans in place to do it during step 2 in Ontario's COVID restrictions. And we happened to have an MSL board meeting scheduled for the 20th after that announcement. And that morning, the Ontario government announced that stage 3 would open on the 26th. So that night, a couple of our governors said, we should be playing. We should be playing. And we had a short debate about when to start and when to finish, because of younger players having to get back to school, and how long would it take you to get your teams ready. And I said, well, I'll send out a proposed schedule tomorrow. And at that time, we were still talking about 6 teams. Yeah, it was a lot of work to get it done, but I give credit to the volunteers and our MSL executive. A lot of people stepped up the plate real quick. First of all, Jamie Dowick with the use of the track, Lynn Withers, Brad McCarthy, Gary Morrison, JVI, Jamie Plunkett from Uncommon Fit, Vic Utrosa got the tickets ready, and really, passionate lacrosse people got together and said, we need to be relevant again. We can't miss another full season. And, again, I give a lot of credit to those people who volunteer their time and their commitment to get it going 5 days later. And Tuesday night, if we had to do it over again, we could make some improvements, but very, very pleased with the quality of play, pleased with the webcast. Fans, interaction with the fans has been really good. But more importantly, I think than anything, the players were ecstatic to get back on the floor. It would.
Oh, yeah.
It was just amazing to see how happy they were to be playing the game again.
And to play other players of their ability that they haven't had a chance to be measured against.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
The teams had expanded rosters, as you know, and some teams used, over 40 players, and got to look at those young guys and throw in a few veterans. People were worried about whether it was going to be rusty, the players were going to be rusty or not, but it was like riding a bike. I think after they got their first pass or their first hit in, it was okay, game on, let's go.
Well, also having a number of the juniors who were old enough to play, that didn't hurt either, because they already just came through that 3 week.
Yeah, they really shone in the first couple of weeks too, because you could tell that they had been playing a pretty high level of lacrosse, coming into the Classic.
Well, both of these things, I think, really bolstered a lot of these kids for the draft for the NLL, because some guys who weren't even on the map went first round. And I give credit to the OJLL and the MSL stuff, just to be able to give them that platform to be able to show their skills. Yeah,
I was talking to the OJLL guys and to our own guys. We actually had quite a few NLL teams show up at the Classic, and they showed up there too to see precisely the young guys or certain guys, and they showed themselves well, and obviously a lot of guys moved up quite a ways in the draft order.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely.
This proves. Oh, sorry, Gary.
Go ahead, Frank.
It proves how important the game is, because this was an event that wasn't about a champion. It was actually about a return of lacrosse on behalf of the players as much as the fans.
Yeah, for sure. That, and our governors and our managers certainly pointed that out. So the players need to play. We were unsure. They were uncertain of what it was going to cost us to put it together, and it all worked out quite well. As we said, to see the smiles and the excitement of the players getting back out there was just incredible.
Well, Gary was smiling the whole time he was going there, so I know some of the fans enjoyed it too. At least I know one anyway.
Yeah. I'm curious about one thing though. You guys changed jerseys, excuse me, and used Uncommon Fit. How did this match made in heaven happen? These jerseys were beautiful. A lot of them were just gorgeous.
But Jamie and I have known each other for quite a while over the years. We actually we're not really fans of each other, quite a while ago, but we got to know each other. And he's like a lot of businesses. I've been kind of sitting around during the pandemic waiting for things to start up again. And he called me up and said, "Hey, I got an idea for the Classic." And I said, "Well, it's the same thing. It starts in 5 days." He said, "Oh, don't worry about it." I said, "I might miss the first game, but I'll get him there for the second game." And I don't think any team, maybe Six Nations was a little different. So I think maybe they didn't get until the third or fourth game, but the referees and the jerseys were all supplied by Jamie. They had a little bit of work to do getting the design to them right away and get them produced. And it was actually Jimmy Milligan delivered most of them, because he's from Peterborough. And Jamie's in Peterborough, and Knights Coburg was playing. Jimmy go and pick them up and bring them down.
They were really, really great. I thought that was just such a nice extra touch to everything.
Yeah, it was really good, and it was Six Nations was a pretty interesting story, where they said they wanted to put "Every Child Matters" on the front of their jersey, and the timing was right, and you saw the circle of friendship at the start of that game. It was a pretty emotional moment for everyone in the building, and I thought it was a nice touch.
Most definitely. JVI, if I wasn't already impressed with them, and I know Matt Carrick very well, from what they did in OJLL and what they did with MSL was absolutely impeccable. Their broadcasting of the games, well, we don't have it as a secret anymore. And that's the whole goal of everything here, really, I think.
Yeah, I think for an old timer like me, webcasting, the technology, that's kind of not my forte, and I trust others to do it. And I think the quality of Gary's work and his crews, including Matt, and the other guys that were in front of the camera, it was kudos to them, because again, the feedback through social media and our website, whatever, people were thrilled at the quality. The people that couldn't make it down to the track, and how good it was. I'm watching from home. This is great. They added the score buck in that we didn't have in the past, and they added the instant replay, which we didn't have in the past, and people were really thrilled about it. As a matter of fact, Gary and I are in conversations right now what we're going to do through 2022 and next year's Man Cup.
Well, it's funny because I actually used this replay for the game when I'm there, because with the delay, it gave me the replay of the goal. It was
if I wanted to see something, I'd head upstairs and ask somebody to play it back for me.
Great minds think alike. Now, what are your thoughts on marketing of Major Series Lacrosse coming into 2022, when we have hopefully a full season and everything back to semi-normal?
Well, just I guess to put that in perspective, to use the Classic as an example to get us kicked off here, our numbers were incredible. We had over 100,000 views of the webcast. Just got the final social media numbers today. We're 950,000 impressions on Twitter accounts, and they're all marketable numbers. Mm-hmm. Now we have a base to go from, and we've talked to some marketing people about how can we use this to kick off, our long-term stability. And we've had some people tell us some really good stories. Stories are good, but they're the start of depositing money in the bank account. Mm-hmm. Now we have to put those stories into action, and I think we have a pretty good plan to do that, leading through next year's Man Cup. And we share a lot of information now that never happened in the past with our partners in the WLA and their commissioner, Paul Domani. Mm-hmm. He and I talk on a regular basis, because let's face it, this is our national summer sport, and our rivalry is very similar to the Grey Cup. It's an East-West, BC versus Ontario Senior A championship, and we need to use the momentum of the Classic to bring this thing into the forefront.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. Frank?
Yeah, I wonder, you used the term, you mentioned the Grey Cup and the Canadian Football League. There's a symbiotic relationship, at least here in Southern Ontario, between the CFL and the NLL. Many of the fans that follow the Argos and the Ticats are Toronto Rock fans. I know that personally, because I know, as Gary does, we know quite a few people in that regard. And we talk about, people worry about the Canadian Football League, because it's all Canadian. What makes lacrosse different and stand alone and have the ability to grow as it has been?
I think, minor lacrosse numbers prior to the pandemic have been on a steady incline. Like the growth has been there. But I think our next step in the game, from the grassroots level through the professional level, is we need to figure out how to introduce our game to new Canadians. I think we've missed that step along the way. We're great at marketing the game to ourselves. They're not the people we need to hook. Those guys got hooked like I did when I was a young lad the first time I caught the ball. Mm-hmm. We need to get the guys never seen a lacrosse stick or a lacrosse ball, never heard of the game before. We need to get them into the game. And I think that's our biggest challenge.
Yeah, Gary, you see how he picked up on that real quick?
Uh-huh.
Knowing what we know about the Canadian Football League, what I know about the Canadian Football League, that's exactly the challenge that they're trying to come under. More importantly, though, what really matters is how do you, like you said, get their attention and then hold someone's attention? Is it going directly to the players? Is it parents? Is it the family? Is it making lacrosse, an attractive new age kind of thing? Do you put a new spin on it? What do you see as the plan that might help? One of the main features that might help grow the game here in Canada?
That's a very good question. One that not new to us, I guess, but I have a little bit of a take on that, a personal take, and probably a little pet peeve of mine. A few years ago, I was involved at the CLA. We got involved with Sport Canada, and one of their directives was long-term athlete development. And lacrosse and other sports spent an awful lot of money in developing the materials needed to meet the Sport Canada requirements through long-term athlete development. Mm-hmm. One of the promises made to the PSOs, provincial sports organizations at that time, was that the health departments and the school boards were going to be partners in this. I haven't seen a lot of evidence of that from the so-called partners. I know what money lacrosse has spent, and I know some of what other sports have spent on it to develop materials. And we've had to change our game a little bit at the entry level to meet that requirement. So when it comes to the health side, for many, many years, Ontario Hospital Association used to put together a chart of injuries in sport for males 5 years and over, as an example, not to exclude female, but that was it for data. Lacrosse ranked 28th in sports on hospital visits by 5-year-olds and over through sport. You know, the ones that were all at the top were football, cycling, jogging. And there's a perception about our game that it's dangerous and it's physical. Well, the answer to that, to me, has always been, if you wear all the equipment and you wear it properly, and the rules of the game are called the way they're intended, it's very, very difficult to get hurt playing lacrosse. Mm-hmm. I played all other sports when I was young, never had an injury of significance in lacrosse. I had lots in hockey, lots in football. Mm-hmm. And I think that perception needs to be taught to the people we're trying to bring into the game. And the second part is, how do you fall in love with lacrosse? I think the same way we all did. You just challenge a kid in your neighborhood or a kid at the schoolyard to throw a ball against the wall 100 times. And if he misses it 99 times, no big deal. If he catches it the 100th time, won't take him another 100 to catch it again. And, somewhere in that next 100, he's going to catch 3 or 4 or 5 and say, hey, this 3-dimensional game is pretty good.
Yeah, profile too is everything, right? How a team, an organization, and of course a game is profiled is very important. I have my own pet peeve. I love the championships that lacrosse has. I really think that what might help is that, and I know this is another parallel to the Canadian Football League. We're becoming a smaller and smaller world, right? And I know we haven't talked yet about your experience. I think I saw something about Czechoslovakia, right? There's an assistance to making the popularity at home if it's more popular everywhere else.
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges out there now for all sports, and the pandemic is a great unknown because you take 2 years of entry-level players away. I know from firsthand experience, it takes a year to lose them. It takes 10 years to get them back. Mm-hmm. And I think that the challenges ahead rely on mostly the teaching or the coaching of the game. And, coaching is a lot better now than it was, years ago. I played one of the greatest coaches of all time. If he did what he did to us back then, nowadays it'd be called abuse. I think coaches and administrators in particular and parents need to understand why children or why youth play sports? And the answer at every single clinic I've ever been to is the same. It's to have fun.
Right.
And I think we lose sight of that as administrators.
Yeah, and if I could circle back a little bit back to the schools, the partner. The biggest problem with schools today is they are not as connected to sport as much as they used to be back in my day when I was younger. And schools, it was almost like a responsibility to have a hockey team and to provide a coach, football team, even baseball teams and lacrosse teams. It was part of the curriculum. And I'm talking about the youngest of the students. Today, I think the challenge that to me is becoming more and more obvious, and that is that you're competing with those people, the people that do this, that don't go outside to exercise and to have fun. We've almost made going to schools, exercise, team sports, we're finding reasons not to do it. And that's another challenge. I think that's a problem today for all sports, not just lacrosse. And I don't mean to get away from lacrosse.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. I think there's a real opportunity there for the education system. And I will talk about lacrosse because it is our national summer sport. And, we're proud to be part of it because it's the creator's game. There's an amazing story to be told there. And I've seen it firsthand. And here in the Durham region, we have a group called Lacrosse in Motion, which, primary focus is to get into primary schools and introduce the program. And, we have a lot of red tape to go through to deal with the school boards to get in there and, check all the boxes and all that. But when we go into the schools, and Bruce Codd from the OLA is a big part of that, and Rick Phillips, the coaching chair. When we tell a story about the history of lacrosse and where it came from, and show them pictures, tell stories about John Tavares, the lacrosse player, not the hockey player, it's amazing how many teachers come up to us and say, well, I never knew that. And I believe that should be part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
Because it is our national summer sport, and there's a pretty good story to be told there. And the kids are always engaged. They're wide-eyed and listening. And then we go through the skills and drills, and you see those kids that have never had a stick in their hand before come to you and say, well, how do I join up? How do I play this game? And I think there's a missed opportunity there.
Yeah, it's something that has to be worked on, but that is a challenge of how we live today, as opposed to, when I went to school, I went uphill both ways, at home to school and back home again. So, it's a different lifestyle today. I kid. So looking at the future, we only have a few minutes left. Gary, I just want to ask this question, and you can have it from there. Looking into the future, how do you see lacrosse's advancement? Because we're seeing great strides in the NLL. Do we have the minor parts of the game to help feed that growth that seems to be apparent very soon in professional lacrosse, for example, the National Lacrosse League?
I think the willingness is there. I think the methods are missing.
What kind of methods?
I'm sorry, Frank.
Oh, I just asking what kind of methods. I should have just let you.
Well, I think the methods are we're cross polluting each other right now with the for-profit groups, the not-for-profit groups, the club organizations, and governing bodies, and everybody likes to throw around the word summit, but we really need the major players, and by that I mean the governing bodies, to sit down and have an honest discussion about your question. How do we get from point A to point B and continue the growth at the entry level player? The elite level will always take care of itself. It's organizations that have good house league programs always have good rep programs because simply because of numbers. And to get the thumbs around a stick or a ball or a tennis racket, I don't care what it is, but to have them engaged in an activity to be fit for life is important. But I think people are too protective of their own organizations that they They don't want to open up and have frank discussions about how do we get this game to the next level.
I understand that completely, and that's generally speaking one of the problems with life today, where we lack this ability to understand that if I help you and we do something together, you'll be helping me. It's just this take mentality that I guess we're all afraid of, that seems to have grown in this generation or in these past few years.
One thing that old age and maturity gives you is the ability to listen more than you could when you were young. And
and we have to listen harder because our hearing's starting to go.
Absolutely. But I think that, if there's one bad thing about lacrosse is some of those leaders that have been around for a long time, and give them a lot of credit. Too many times they want to talk instead of listen. Mm-hmm. And they stand up and pontificate on everything they know about the game instead of listening to what the problems are and resolving them.
Yeah. One of the things that I had been on my soapbox about forever is we touched upon getting new people to watch the game. But it's tough when we have pay-per-view for games and we're not going to get them to pay for something they don't know about. Enter the game of the week that the NLL is going to be doing. You guys did it with some of the retro games in MSL. Do you think that would be an idea going forward to have a game of the week for, say, Twitter or for Facebook or something like that come the new season?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Gary. And as an old timer, I have a lot of trouble now getting my head wrapped around webcasting and streaming and 57 channels and nothing on, and there's no print media to speak of anymore. One of my brothers is a teacher, and I was really mad at him once because he said his job as a teacher was to give a kid $1, send them to the corner store, buy a newspaper, and bring it home and read it. Well, pretty hard to do that nowadays because there's no paper to buy. But anyhow, I think it's the engagement and the physical activity that. How do you do that? I mean, we're going through that ourselves in MSL now. Is how do we get the widest audience we can? We have a great product, but what's the best avenue to get that product to everyone? Yeah,
the benefits of good health, I think, have been lost as well. Where when we look at sports and the benefit it gives us, there's nothing this pandemic has taught us more than the fact that good health could actually save your life. And that's something that we don't understand, and it's politically incorrect to talk about that. So that's kind of a problem for sports, where the benefits that the number one benefit that it has is, good health. And good health, I don't know if it matters that much politically today.
Yeah, it certainly seems to be a difficult question, but the audience thing, two things come to mind is, when I was growing up, when I was very young and involved in lacrosse, if you told me there were 70 countries going to be playing lacrosse someday, I would have said you're crazy. And, even 25 years ago, if somebody told me there's going to be 18,000 people at the Air Canada Centre watching a lacrosse game, I'd have said you're crazy. And one of the reasons there was 18,000 people there is because the early ownership group of the Toronto Rock decided to put this game on television.
Right.
They paid for it. Because, the networks weren't knocking on their door saying, hey, can we come and broadcast your games? They paid to have that done. Yeah. And it paid big dividends for a long time.
Now, we talked just briefly internationally. The Hrebeski Memorial thing, you went there a number of times. Let's talk a little bit before we're done, because we only have a couple of minutes left, about your foot in international lacrosse play.
Yeah, well, that came about because the World Championships were going to be held in Oshawa. And a former Green Gael, Joe Crosney, was asked to be their liaison while they're here because he could speak the language. And, the Green Gael old boys are pretty tight. We meet together on a regular basis, usually every Monday for coffee. And they wanted to play some exhibition games before the World Championships started. And I said, well, I can get the junior B team will play them. And, we had no idea what the caliber was going to be like. And So we threw a couple of well-known local NLL players into our lineup and played them, and actually ended up in an 11-11 tie. And like lacrosse players do, we said, well, let's go to the pub afterwards and have a pint, and we became really good friends as a result of that. And they invited our alumni team back to the Czech Republic in 2007, and we found a bunch of guys that could get a week off work and could afford the trip, and we went over there and had a really good tournament. We won against probably at that time 10 European teams that were not very good at box yet, and we ran a bunch of clinics over there for their youth with interpreters, which was a lot of fun. It was more fun for our players than it was for the kids. And I'm really proud of what we did over there, because I think we played a small part in the growth of international box lacrosse.
So what does the future hold for Doug Luey?
Good question. I'd like to travel again soon when it's safe.
You and me both.
Good answer.
I look forward to, I guess, Paul Dalmani and I are just putting the finishing touches on the 2-year Man Cup agreement for both East and West. And I'm looking forward to a return to the new normal and putting into action all these great ideas we've got and the momentum we've got. So we'll take the baby steps. Let's get these 2 years in, and then we'll see what lacrosse looks like in 2 years.
Well, you've got a lot of anticipation to work with.
Yeah, for sure. I think people are excited about the game again.
People are excited, period.
Yeah.
Right? About everything.
No, but you could tell that at track that everybody was just chomping at the bit to, get out to a live game. It's only so many retro games we can watch,
Yeah.
But to see it live, and especially having the youth, I thought it was a great idea, because I thought it was a great training camp per se, to see what the teams had. And we'd watched a lot of these guys in junior and how they would react when you start getting to the next level. I thought it was a tremendous idea.
Yeah, no, it was good. I mean, the only difference you saw early is the young guys that hadn't played with the elite players before weren't expecting those passes that sharp, that crisp, and on their stick, and there's a little bit of an adjustment for them. And it's like even when you're a kid, you don't throw the ball to that guy because he can't catch it. But then as the tournament evolved, there's more and more trust, and we had some great games. We had 29 goals scored in one game. We had some great goaltending. We had some fantastic plays. Anything in lacrosse.
How many games went right down to the wire?
Yeah, a lot of close games.
Oh, it was incredible. It kept you to the edge, riveted to the edge of your seat throughout. Also, you're talking about how sharp the passes are, but they're also shooting on guys like Warren Hill. So they had to have crisp shots too. So I'm sure it elevated their skill level, and it certainly elevated their thinking levels to that kind of mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doug, really appreciate you being here with us. And it was my pleasure, my personal pleasure to listen to your experience. And it's nice to talk to somebody whose hands lacrosse depends. So thanks for everything that you do.
Well, thank you, Frank. I really appreciate that. And Gary, one last thing about the track is, as busy as we were at the track, I hadn't seen a lot of those people for a couple of years. So, you get sidetracked and talking for 5 minutes. I was supposed to be doing something else.
That's true. We got into a good conversation too in one of those intermissions that went a little bit longer than it had to.
Yeah. Thanks very much. The hour went fast, and enjoyed talking.
Thanks so much for taking the time with us, Doug. I really appreciate it.
Take care. We'll see you in the rink.
You betcha.
Gary, thanks a lot, buddy.
Take care, Frank. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, for Gary Groob and Doug Luey, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching Lacrosse Talk, NLL Talk as well, seen live Thursdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network for Lacrosse Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer. Please check out spanglishworld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, and download it. Thank you for watching. See you next Thursday, 4 p.m.
Cheers.